Folks, Bloomberg is reporting that we might end up experiencing a sharp and short decline in markets thanks to Omicron. Therefore, let's get into an Omicron update. Keep in mind, you can go to the link down below, go to metkevin.com/cashflow to sign up for potential future fund announcements. No other subscriptions via that email sign up, just in case we have an announcement. Check that out, link down below. Hey everyone, me Kevin here with a quick COVID update. We have some good news. New York City COVID cases have reached a peak and are beginning their descent. As of Wednesday, positivity positivity rates stood at 17%, making it the third straight day where fewer than 1 in 5 New York tests came back positive. The 17% positivity rate is still much higher than the 1.5% we saw just 2 months ago, but it is down dramatically from the 30% positivity rate that we saw in the past few weeks. This, folks, on screen now is the chart of COVID cases in New York City. You can clearly see an inflection point down about 3.5 to 4 weeks into the beginning of the surge. The beginning of the surge in New York came right around December 18th. We're about 3.5 to 4 weeks from that right now to where we started seeing an inflection point to the downside over the last 2 to 3 days here, which is very good news. We hope that this continues to the downside. Folks, we are seeing similar inflection points in our national data for the United Kingdom. We are starting to see a little bit of an inflection point up in Germany. One of the reasons Germany might be seeing a little bit of an inflection up after this down is that we believe that the first wave here in the middle was a Delta wave, which then subsided, and now the Omicron wave is coming to Germany. Canada appears to have hit somewhat of a ceiling, which is a blessing. The United Kingdom has had a substantial surge that really began around December 14th. And that surge crested around January 5th, about 3 weeks later. And for the last week, we've been in decline in the United Kingdom, and the rate of decline has subsided. We've not just hit a ceiling, we have subsided with the rate of decline. Very, very positive. France and Italy are starting to show tiny little signs that they might be slowing here at the top, but it might be too soon to tell, given that we have had little pauses in data reads as well for France and Italy. So we'll keep an eye on this. Now, one thing to keep an eye on is we have not seen a substantial inflection point to the upside yet in excess deaths per 100,000 people. This is because, in general, we have seen and the biggest, well, I should say, the largest inflection point up we saw in excess deaths. This is how many people we would expect to die versus how many people are actually dying. The largest increase we saw, or the largest bump here, was really when Delta started spreading. So if we look at around August through September, and then briefly thereafter, about 6 weeks after, that's when we really started seeing an inflection point up in deaths. Right around here in early November, excess deaths in the United States, which aligns with when individuals might start dying after COVID exposure due to Delta. But we're not really seeing a substantial inflection point to the upside, especially since we've had a Delta surge that lasted throughout the northeast of the United States through November. Delta was still surging, right? We have not really seen that sort of inflection point up on Omicron, which is definitely a sign that Omicron is, at least based on excess deaths, less deadly. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to look at death data for COVID and Omicron, because take a look at this. When we look at cumulative deaths due to COVID in the United Kingdom, let's say, the chart looks like it's going up, but there's a disclaimer here that says limited testing and challenges in attributing deaths to COVID may mislead or may not be an accurate count of the true number of deaths from COVID. And so we are expecting that the true number of deaths from COVID is substantially lower than with other variants like the Delta variant. Of course, that doesn't help us discern why we see this sort of spike here, the 7-day average. And again, it's possibly just because more people are testing positive with COVID, and then who are dying from other reasons. Now, we are still seeing more and more evidence that the either prior illness with COVID or prior illness with, get this, the common cold, as we talked about and broke the story about 3 days ago, is helping limit individuals from actually being symptomatic with COVID. This is leading less people to get tested than we actually expect. We think we're only catching about 1 in 5 actual positive cases of COVID, given at-home testing or a lack of testing completely. But again, individuals who have been exposed to the cold or who had the cold might actually have a strong T-cell response against COVID. This is very positive in terms of a development, and it makes sense because the common 4 to 5 strains of the common cold are human coronaviruses, which mean they're a type of coronavirus compared to the SARS-CoV-2 that we have now with COVID. And we're seeing that immunity transfer over, at least to some degree. Still being studied, but very good news. Dr. Fauci believes that everybody is eventually going to get COVID, well, essentially as we begin to live with it. And I think this is quite an interesting U-turn coming from Fauci. The White House will be distributing 10 million COVID tests per month per month to schools, 5 million rapid tests, 5 million PCR tests. Of course, TBD when those will actually arrive. Israel plans to administer a 4th dose of the vaccine for individuals 60 and over, as well as to medical staff who have had their last booster at least 4 months ago. Soon after this announcement, Israel released a preliminary study showing that the 4th shot generated a 5-fold boost in antibodies in the week following the booster, but is this really necessary? According to the European Drug Regulators Group, there is still no data supporting the need for a 4th shot. And went as far as saying that multiple boosters might ultimately lead to, they wrote, potential problems for immune system response. This was the head of biological health threats at the European Medicines Agency, the EMA, and they're basically saying, hey, we're not sure if we should be boosting folks every 4 months. That's 3 times a year. This might be too much, and we could end up having larger immune system problems providing so many boosters. So not a raging endorsement by a medical agency for boosters. They prefer a once-a-year booster, like a flu shot, whereas you go into the flu season, you take a shot, but you don't regularly take one to try to get this annual protection by just constantly jabbing yourself while you're getting jabbed. The World Health Organization actually reiterated this, indicating that repeated booster doses of the original vaccines are likely to be unsustainable. Keep in mind that COVID cases have increased 55% for the week ending January 9th. Weekly deaths remained near unchanged from a week prior. Numbers-wise, and that's globally, numbers-wise, this is 15 million new cases and 43,000 deaths last week. The big question, though, for how COVID is going to continue to impact markets has to do with China. For example, in one of the largest ports and a production hub for foreign businesses in China, China ordered a half-day break just for COVID testing, bringing fears that Omicron might disrupt global supply chains just like Delta did. Hopefully it doesn't, but China has a zero COVID policy, and multiple cities have gone into lockdown ahead of the Winter Olympics. Over 20 million people are now confined by these lockdowns in China. All vehicles have been banned from roads moving into one such city, as an example. It has a population of 5.5 million. And you can't even drive into the city right now. And so the economic impact China has on the rest of the world is obviously substantial, specifically with regards to manufacturing, the production of goods and services, but then also shipping them, getting them out of China. According to Bloomberg, we're already seeing trucker shortages given the lockdowns in China. And this is an exacerbation of trucker shortages that we've seen in the United States as well. Anyway, this is a brief update on what's going on with COVID. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this helpful, consider sharing the video. And folks, see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.